Well, good morning, New York time, and good afternoon, UK time, and around the rest of the world, make the time adjustments. We are in our final day of the Put Kids First virtual summit that was a result of our canceling an event, a face-to-face event on crimes against children online that was going to be hosted at Princeton University later this spring. We decided to bring it online, and I guess it's a good thing we did because everyone's in lockdown or working from home or making sure that they are a little bit more isolated from others than we had before. And the best way of doing that is learning online and using LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live as a way to engage you. We'll be taking all of these live sessions once they're done, and we'll be posting them on cybersafetylive.com. And you'll be able to participate in a traditional summit format by clicking on all of the links. We'll be adding other speakers and videos and resources to those. The ones we needed the most and we needed to engage with the most, we've done over these 3 days. I'm going to introduce you to someone who is a newer friend, and he's a longtime friend and supplier to those I know in the industry. And he's got a lot of heart, but even more importantly, he's got a great product. So I want you to meet Robin. Robin Toombs is the head of Yoti. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Parry.
And you are in London right now?
We are in a very deserted London.
It looks like that's your office.
It is. So there's a few of us in, but out of 200 people, there's only about 10 people in the office.
Oh,
everybody else is working from home.
Well, I'm working from home, but I always do. So my life hasn't changed terribly much, except I've brought my dog to my dog trainer and boarder, and she's kept him for 3 days so that I can function. Because when I get online, he comes over and throws things at me and barks. And so anyhow,
I be left out.
It really is. So we are addressing, in particular, over these 3 days, digital crimes and digitally facilitated crimes against children. So sex trafficking, child sexual images, what we used to call child pornography, sexting, sextortion, the really serious stuff. And your product was initially designed, well, I should ask you to explain what your product is, but it was originally designed on age verification, age estimation, a way to age gate a lot of adult content and content that required that you were of a certain age to buy goods, alcohol, tobacco, whatever, regulated goods. And now, as the world has changed a little bit, we're finding that it's a very powerful tool to keep kids safe. So tell us what it was designed for, and then how we can start looking at using it to do even more.
Okay, so Yoti was, we set up Yoti in 2014. And that was very much to kind of solve the issue of digital identity online. So we kind of worked out that we could read the near field communication chips in passports, and the cameras in smartphones were getting better and better, and the number of smartphones that the general population were buying was getting huge. And we thought, well, actually, that's probably the foundation stone for doing digital identity effectively. So if you can take somebody's face, check that it really is them in front of the camera on their phone, and then once you've done that, let them read the chip in their passport, and then match the clean image from that secure chip passport to the face that they've just put into the app. And if they match, then all of the biographical information from the passport, you can be very confident that that is really Robin John Toombs and which nationality he is and what date of birth. We did that, and we launched the app in kind of beta at the end of 2016. Lots of young people here in the UK have to prove age a lot, and they said, you know, this is a really useful thing for us to be able to do to prove on our phones. In the last 3 years since we launched the app, we've had about 6.3 million people install the app. And lots of those people have added their passports or their driving licenses. If it's a driving license and it's US, we'll check it to the US driving license database. If it's any passport and it's got a chip in it, they can choose to read the chip in their passport. And as we did a lot of this digital identity, allowing people to then share what their verified name was or their verified date of birth, we began to realize about 2 years ago that we were able to basically build up a set of images of people in the app, anonymized, where we could say, well, this is what a 50-year-old looks like. And because we've got hundreds or thousands of 50-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 30-year-olds, we began to kind of work on some machine learning to basically train up and say, look, we'd like to work out what we think somebody's age is once we've fed into a kind of machine learning system what lots and lots of people aged a certain year of birth are. And initially we thought, we're not sure how accurate this will be, but let's see how it goes. And about 1.25 years ago, we realized it was getting quite accurate, and we launched it, and quite a lot of businesses said to us, we'd like to use that. And since we did that, we've been continually improving it as our Yoti kind of community gets bigger and bigger, and gives us consent to basically do this anonymized age estimation. And lots of different sectors now, from supermarkets, gaming machines, all sorts of industries which want to basically be more sure that somebody is over 18 or over 21 or possibly younger than 18. Lots and lots of online and offline sectors want to be able to do that, and not everybody has a date of birth and a passport or a driving license. So this solution, works for people who otherwise would be socially excluded as well.
Well, I thought it was fascinating. So I'd heard about you first from Jeff Cook, who's a longtime client and good friend. And I was in the UK to meet with the ICO's offices, and I called saying, are you around? And literally showed up in your office. Well, somebody on your team was trying to reach me in New York. So that was interesting. And I said, I want to talk about what you're doing. And you were like, okay, who are you?
Sorry.
No, that's good. But I'm very excited about the potential for this. I do so much on advising industry and advising policymakers and best practice standards. And as we start looking at this, and we look at the use of AI and age verification and identity verification and authentication, it's really the answer of so much. So I've been talking to kids. I've been doing this for 26 years, and I talk to thousands of kids every month in person. I guess this month it's going to be online. And I said, what can we do to make sure that social networking is safer? And it's interesting that they all come to me and they said, we want the Snaps and TikToks and the Instagrams of the world to know who everyone is. Not just their names, but I want to know who they are and where they live. And we know that if they have the social insurance or social security number, that they can keep us safe. At which point I pass out on the ground saying the last thing I want Facebook to have is our social insurance or social security numbers. But the young people really want someone to be in charge. They want to know that someone knows who they are and can authenticate that they really are who they say they are. And I think there's a lot of potential there, Robin, maybe with some new networks that are safer for kids, but authenticated as well. But as you start moving forward, the problem I'm having with AI and using it for child safety and the rest is that we just don't have enough data on young people to be able to do age estimations and the other type of confirmation of identity that we can with adults. Are you running into the same problem?
Yeah, we definitely are. So, we're pretty confident. We publish our results of our age estimation by age group and by gender and by skin tone, using the Fitzwilliam scale. And we put all of that on the web. Each time we basically improve the algorithm, which is every couple of months, we publish the new results and show the trends and the increasing accuracy. And we do that for two reasons. One, transparency, and two, to kind of really make sure that anybody else who's interested in this sector can understand, where it's going. So at the moment, we do all of our testing on about 100,000 tagged images. which are separate, obviously, to the training data. All of that data is consented from Yoti users. And, for anybody who is 15, 16, all the way up to, kind of 60, it works really well. So particularly kind of 16 to 25-year-olds, most of the people in that age bracket have not had too many cigarettes, too much sun, too much alcohol, too many things which would potentially, age them at a different rate.
We hope.
40 or 60. Yeah, we hope. Certainly that seems to be the case. But it's much harder to do, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8-year-olds because, obviously GDPR and just, common kind of sense that the consent for doing age estimation on an 8-year-old, if they haven't given you a passport or whatever, becomes very difficult. You could ask a parent, but a parent probably will be fairly cautious about doing that, even with a principled private business. And, we're not going to scrape yearbooks and do it without people's consent because that's not appropriate. You wouldn't get dates of birth. You would get an estimate of that yearbook as probably 7-year-olds or 9-year-olds. But we want to do it the right way. And we've talked to government and we've talked to others and they've kind of said, this would be really, really useful, but it is difficult to work out how to get the consent for the large number of images to ensure that you can do this accurately.
Right. Well, GDPR is less of a problem than COPPA. So GDPR is the general privacy regulation in Europe, and it tosses the kids' issues back to each of the countries and the ICOs of each of the countries, asking them to set the kids' standards, in effect. COPPA in the United States is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and that regulates kids under the age of 13, so 12 and under. And they're not allowed to share information that's personally identifiable, which are even audio files without being identified to a name. It's very comprehensive these days. And you can get parental consent for that. In some of the new proposals we're seeing out of the data commissioners in Europe in particular, parents cannot consent to things if the commissioner has decided that it's just not in the best interests of children. So the COPPA in the United States has an exemption for nonprofits. So if you are a registered charity in the United States, and we are, you don't have to comply with COPPA. Most of us do because it's good practices. We want parents to know what their kids are doing. But if you're providing help services to children whose parents might be abusive, to children whose parents might be alcoholics or drug addicts, or to children who have questions about their sexuality and sexual identification. There are a lot of things that they do not want, and perhaps nonprofits and help groups here do not want to have to go through the parents to provide. It means that the children just won't use your services or that the children will be in greater risk. So we have the ability to gather and get perhaps more parents behind a movement to create smarter technologies used in a responsible way that would allow trusted members of industry to keep kids safer. And I was thinking about how we can help you and you can help us address this issue. And so, we may be able to get parental consent and notify parents and start getting a lot of different ethnic groups, which is a separate issue, and the young people so that we can get the range you need to make your system work more effectively. But there's also something that I was speaking in Austria. And I'm not a techie, I just play one on television. And I was talking about AI policy and cyber safety and the rest. And that I can do. But somebody was there and they were talking about augmented, what is it? No, my husband's behind me helping me remember the word. I've been running the summit live from 8 in till midnight. And last night was an hour session in Japanese. And that was really good at helping me sleep. But it's artificial identification. And so that they take real images and they mix them up in such a way that they are features that kids may have and they make sense, but they are fake images, manufactured images that can then be used to train AI. Have you heard about that? And I know I'm still using the wrong word, but
yeah, we have heard about that. We haven't been doing anything ourselves with that at the moment. We're, our biggest kind of focus is on increasing the the diversity of our training data. So we publish, as I say, by skin tone, and we don't at the moment have as many darker skinned people in our data as our lighter skinned people. We're actually in the kind of age of 16 to 20, we have pretty equal amounts, and interestingly, we have pretty equal accuracy when we have equal amounts, which is quite interesting. But in older people, less people, females aged 50 plus are not at the moment using Yoti very often to prove age at the supermarket, whereas lots of 18-year-olds can do so. So we're doing as much as we can to basically improve the diversity of our 18 plus data. We'll continue to look into that, but at the moment we think the most reliable, and certainly when we talk to regulators, they like the fact that we've got genuine dates of birth. We anonymize those, obviously, so all of our data is anonymized. Nobody gets to see what somebody's date of birth is in Yoti. What we do is we just basically take the year, we tag that image with the year. We do then basically tag in a secure area that might be a dark-skinned person, and it may be somebody who has got a beard. But effectively, apart from that tagging, we have no idea who that person is. And once you've left that room, you would never be able to, you can't take a phone in there. You can't take any devices to try and keep a record of what you're doing in that room. And that allows our training data to be more effectively tagged, so that we can definitely then understand how accurate we're getting across different groups. Spoofing is obviously a big issue for us. So we do a lot on liveness detection as well. So a lot of our businesses, if it's a live streaming site, it's obvious that I'm not going to wear a mask if I'm trying to talk to people. But we get a lot of instances where a business will say, we've got a 13 to 17-year-old live stream group where we're concerned that maybe a 9 or a 10-year-old is self-asserting that they're 13 to get into the stream, or an older sister or brother is creating the account for them and putting the older person's profile picture into the account. And then there might be a 25-year-old who is self-asserting that they're 17. So you now sometimes have a 10-year-old and a 25-year-old talking to. So obviously any trusted brand doesn't want that to be the case, but it's impossible for all those businesses to moderate every day with manual people when you've got literally millions of people logging in several times a day to talk to each other. So they basically just take those images and they send them to our database. Obviously, we don't know who these people are. We just basically age estimate, send the answer back as to what we believe the estimated age is, whether it's 10 or 14, and we then immediately delete the image. And in the first year of running this service, we've done 270 million age estimations for different businesses. All of that information was immediately deleted by ourselves. So we don't learn anything from what we're doing there. A lot of businesses have said it's been very helpful to them, but we are flagging up to them people who may be materially misstating their age. The liveness, where there isn't a live streaming context, so it might just be a messaging site, there's a much greater risk in a messaging site that a paedophile may be 45 claiming to be much younger, and without a picture and without any live stream, that's a higher risk. So I think regulators at some point are going to say to sites, you need to basically require this person to do a live selfie before they start messaging. That may well be destroyed immediately after. I think regulators will want to protect privacy because most people, are not a danger. But it's easy to then basically check that that's a live face, check that that live face is, 15 rather than 45. And it's not a perfect system. I could use somebody aged 15 to get me into a site and then do messaging. But, it's much, much harder if I have to keep on using other people to do part of my process. And then I've got to kind of explain possibly to those people why I'm doing this. And, it just makes it much harder for the wrong people to be doing the wrong things.
And, luckily we've learned that a lot of the wrong people are very stupid when it comes to identity online. We've had a number of cases, somebody who was a very high level US appointed official who was sending covers of Newsweek that he was on to girls he was luring and grooming, saying, "Oh no, I'm really famous. This is who I am," and he was. But are you looking at, or are you doing identity verification as well? So not just how old are you, roughly based upon these things, but Parry is that Parry, and making it easier for us to enter authenticated communication so that you're more comfortable that the person you think you're talking to really is.
Yes, we certainly are. That's the core part of the Yoti app, is to allow anyone for free to download the app voluntarily, prove who they are, supported by, as I say, their chip passport or their driving license checked to the US driving license database or another database. And once we've been, to a high level of confidence that that is a real living face checked to their real living photo ID document, a non-expired one which can be checked to a source, then we have a very high confidence that it is Robin Toombs, and then I can use the app to share that with. That could be with TikTok, it could be with any site that wants to basically get that level of verification. So some sites won't want that because of friction, or they want to remain in the anonymous kind of space. But lots and lots of other sites have always found it very difficult to allow customers or individuals, content users, to actually prove who they are. And it's sadly been terribly easy for fraudsters to commit ID fraud. So it's all been knowledge based on the web up to now, which just means I need a few bits of information, and then I can enter into a form and pretend to be somebody else, and that person won't know that. Doesn't mean I've definitely committed a fraud yet, but I'm on the way. I've created an account. I might use that account for a period of time. The account may well be checked to a Experian or to an Equifax. It will possibly pass because I've used correct details of a name and a date of birth and an address, but it's not the person they think it is. So Yoti's radically different. I cannot use a Yoti to pretend to be you, Parry. I would need your live face and your live passport, and I would have to have that on me to read the chip from 3 or 4 inches away on my phone. So it's a much, much stronger level. And I think there will be an increasing number of businesses who say, look, that's the smart way to allow people to do it. They should own their ID, their digital identity, and we should accept it. It's just a much easier way for business and individuals to do it. It becomes much harder for fraudsters. If the pool of people who are only using knowledge gets smaller, fraudsters will begin to find it much harder to continually try and commit ID fraud online.
Your lips to God's ears. Robin, so many of us are now functioning entirely digitally. We can't go to supermarkets, and we can't leave our house, and we're not allowed to hang out with friends. And we are locked in home, and we are engaging in e-commerce and digital authenticated activities in ways that haven't been set up the way they need to. And this live verification is very important. So I want to take people who aren't involved in this field back for a moment. So when we were underage and you wanted to buy beer, you would find an adult who was hanging out outside of the liquor store, and you'd give them some money and say, keep the change and go buy us a 6-pack of beer. And they would. This person would use their ID, and they were legally allowed to buy it, and they'd hand you the beer, and they'd go on their way. And often a lot of these age verification attempted services will take an image and do an age verification on that image using some type of government issued authentication. source, and then that's it. You have that picture, and it's really easy to stick that picture in front of the screen when you need to. But if it requires live, so if you turn around and say, look to the left, look to the right, stand up, sit down, fight, 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 all these crazy things that we do, you will know that that person really is the one behind the screen. And women, we talk about children, and we talk about keeping children out of things where children shouldn't be, adult content sites, the sites that legitimately sell alcohol or cigarettes or some controlled substances, or those where you have to be a certain age to engage, entering into a contract online, buying from Amazon, all of these things. But often we forget women. And we do a great deal at the Cybersafety Group, and before that at Wired Safety over the last 26 years, protecting vulnerable groups, protecting women from cyber stalking. I know that the term catfishing has picked up popularity because of a particular case. We just call it cyber harassment and cyber stalking. And we are working with the United Nations with female ambassadors who have been cyber stalked. There are a lot of high-level women executives this happens to. Politicians. I had to get involved in a case with a senator from Ireland who was receiving death threats for her children because of her position on things. And if we can authenticate identity, before you can get into certain rooms, before you can communicate with certain people, maybe even celebrities who are looking to guard certain communications in a way, that could be extraordinarily helpful. Are you doing anything special with women, or can I talk you into doing something?
So I would say that, quite a few sites, we've got some dating sites and other sites where that is one of the big issues for them, and they've wanted to give more confidence or the option for some of their users to basically say, I am this age, or I am not necessarily this gender, but effectively, my
tricky these days.
My passport, has a female attribute. So yes, that is. And I think, again, regulators are just beginning to recognize that, over the last year, 18 months, liveness has become, the technology, the AI to basically check whether somebody's a real live face and not a mask, or not a screen attack, or a paper attack, or a paper cutout attack. All of those things a couple of years ago would have beaten most people's technology. Actually, in the last 6 months, that's become much more difficult. And you probably are aware of two kind of phrases. One is called active liveness, where you might be winking and shaking your head, or moving your face nearer or further away from a screen. And some of that's now extremely good. But also, just in the last literally 3-6 months, several companies, and we're about to launch ours as well, have got something called passive liveness. And passive liveness is particularly powerful because everybody knows how to take a selfie. And if you're on your phone and you're about to want to go into a particular app or mobile web site, to basically have to take a selfie and have that selfie immediately be able to analyze whether it is a live image or a live face in the image is very powerful, because you haven't got to instruct anybody to do anything which they don't know. Everybody these days is pretty good at taking selfies. And of course, it makes it very awkward for somebody who's the wrong age or the wrong gender and doesn't want to kind of, do that. They can't really say this is far too much friction, and, I don't know what they're doing with my passport. All of that goes away. So most people who are kind of, prepared to recognize that type of technology actually helps people build trust when they're going into certain groups where they might want to know that other people who have the same profile. That's great news.
Is that the way that we used to use typing rhythms to identify people, that there's certain typos certain people make and certain typing rhythms to identify who they were? Is that essentially it? When you take a selfie, you take it in a certain way, you lift it a certain height from you, and you hold your phone in a certain way, or is it something else?
So it's actually using neural networks where we're effectively telling the network this is a live face that's been captured on a
Okay.
phone or on a laptop camera, and then also telling it when we're using an attack. Um, and you need to do that hundreds of thousands of times so that your AI begins to kind of understand what it is that is different about an image where there is a live face captured compared to a paper, image, which is then presented and taken an image of. And again, 2 years, 3 years ago, people weren't sure that that would be an effective way of doing things. Obviously, effective means that a low false positive rate, where actually it is not a live face, but you think it is a live face. So you want a very low false positive rate. But you also need a very low false negative rate, because nobody who is genuinely alive wants to take that selfie and then be told that we think you're
A
not.
cadaver. Yeah.
They obviously know the answer and will then lose trust in the system. So you need both of those things, and that's been difficult to do. But over the last 6 months, quite a few companies, including ourselves, have got that working.
Yeah, otherwise zombies are going to start taking over this artificial intelligence. Um, one of the things we're working on, especially in the United States, because in the US and we think in Canada coming up soon, it's going to be consent based on what information young people of various ages can share and how they can share it. And parental consent can be the override. And under COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is 22 years old now, which tells you how old it is, because that was long after I've been practicing in this space when we were advising on it. But it requires verifiable parental consent. And verifiable parental consent under then technologies, and nothing's really improved terribly much, is it means that you are saying you're the child's parent, and you might have a credit card to say that only adults have a credit card. They don't even compare the names. It's just you have a credit card, therefore you are legally entitled to give consent on behalf of this child. And as we start looking at ways to secure engagement and make things better and give parents more of a role in what their children are doing, we want to authenticate parents with legal authority over the child to the child, that relationship. Offline, it's difficult. In the United States, we don't have government health care for most of us, so that you can go to the schools, and the schools know which parent has legal authority because that's part of their job, and they can authenticate it. There's some laws getting in the way there. In Europe and most places around the world where you have government health care, that is authenticated as part of the government health service. They know that this parent has legal authority over this child and how old that child is and how old the parent is and IDs. Assuming we can find the government authentication materials that you need, is that the kind of thing that you might be able to do with us? Authenticate parent-child relationships?
Yes, so we've obviously been and seen the FTC, and Chairman Wilson we were speaking to when we were last there, and I think there's going to be levels of parental consent. So we already have some businesses. So there's a business called Go Bubble that offers moderated, kind of safe, moderated chat rooms for school-age people. If those school children want to use those chat rooms outside of school, where it's moderated by the school teacher and the AI, which is checking that people don't put bad language and whatever into the chat room, a parent has to basically give consent. Now, initially, that's either using Yoti, where they may well say, well, I'm a parent, Robin Toombs, and my son, who's registered on the school roll, is John Toombs, and that's a pretty good confidence level. That's probably the over 18 parent named Toombs but that's not perfect, because obviously I might be a different surname to my child, but sometimes the perfect gets in the way of the good. And good is better than nothing at all. We have another site which basically uses age estimation to make sure that it is somebody at least who is over 18 or 25 who is giving the consent. All they have to do is use our age estimation. We delete the image, but keep a transaction record, but that has been done, and that person can then give consent. So that's obviously not a DNA test, but at the moment, my son has shown me he can be quite clever. He can put an email in for himself on a site. He can put another email in, pretend that's a parent's email, and sign off as the parent's email, consent for the earlier email. I can't stop him doing that. He's smart enough to do that. That's never going to stop smart kids from doing it. Credit cards, there's numbers of credit cards on forums online. Smart kids will work that out. What they will find harder is to use a live face when they're only 12 to try and pretend that they're 18 or 25. And certainly using a Yoti where there's a date of birth to a passport, they're definitely not going to be able to use that if they haven't got that passport and matching face. So, I think regulators again will have to think, what's the context, how much risk and reward do we want to get from a particular technique to try and get most benefit without throwing it out because nothing's perfect. And sometimes people kind of want the perfect and don't get on and use the pretty good.
Well, pretty good is good. And there's a time delay on the email consent, which is not verifiable parental consent. So if the information's being kept within that company and not used for certain purposes, email consent from a parent is fine. So the kids have always been giving fake emails and they have access to their parents, but at least they put a staggered time. So you send it in and it comes back whenever it is that site decides to send it back, not while the child's watching necessarily. But I think it's a very good business model and something a lot of parents would be happy to pay for, or sponsors may be willing to sponsor the real identification of not just Rob and Toom, but knowing that Rob and Toom has a legal authority over your son. Because there are going to be things that you need to do for school. There are a lot of things that you need to do for real life, certain permissions, access, travel, a number of different things. And it won't work for hundreds of millions of people, but it would work for the 100,000 people who really want to make sure that they know what's going on, and everyone knows that they're the ones that control their child's access to content or privacy and some of those things. So we should talk about that because I've advised the FTC since before COPPA, and it was partly to blame for COPPA. And a lot of us around the world are advising the ICO and other new schemes. New Jersey has some new privacy coming in. California has it, but it doesn't deal with sites that have knowledge that they're dealing with children. So there are these things that we can bring together with standards and approaches, I think would work. And what excited me the most when we started talking, because you didn't know me and I really didn't know you. We walked in, we sat down, and I said, "This is who I am." And you said, "Well, this is what we're doing." And I got very excited, and you took my calls after that. So I think it worked both ways. But I think that it's a promising area, and you are a trustworthy company, Robin. It's not just you. The reason I trust the meat is because I trust Jeff Cook. I've known him for 20 years. I was a lawyer many years ago to my yearbook. The man can't do anything that is unethical. It's just not in his DNA. And I feel the same way about you, and you have that reputation. So while you're still running the company and you can control what it's doing, we know that we can control its ethics and rely on those. When you become as big as Facebook, maybe things will change as they did there. But I think that what you're doing is great. And there may be a way that LinkedIn and some of these professional networks where people need to be authenticated, or you can authenticate them and saying, this live selfie is a licensed realtor. This live selfie is a licensed lawyer. This live selfie is a doctor. So it can authenticate not just who you are, but what you are. And I think it has this promise, and if you do it, I won't have to. So I'm excited. We're going to be talking to Henry at, is it Go Bubble?
Go Bubble.
Go Bubble. We were supposed to talk to him this morning, and I reached out and I said, Henry, I'm not sleeping. I've been doing this because it's my LinkedIn Live account. So no one else can do it under the rules of LinkedIn. So I've been doing this since Sunday evening in Australia. So I'm half asleep and drinking my iced tea, as you can see. So he was kind enough to let us put it off till next week, and then we'll insert it into the feed so people will be able to understand that. But it's time that we all wake up and recognize that we can do better. I spoke to Konstantinos, who heads the IEEE, the Engineering Standards Association. He heads standards for them, and I consult for them, and I deeply admire him. And he has a new passion, and that passion came about after he met Biban, who's doing the 5 rights in the UK. And he said that there was a different way to approach keeping children safe, keeping their data private, recognizing what's appropriate for them. And she can stand up because she's a baroness, and she didn't make me curtsy or anything. So I thought that was great. But I think that people are tired of what we have allowed. I think Techlash is rearing a very powerful head here. We've got new legislation that's been proposed in the U.S. Senate that will change the immunity that we give to service providers. There's, of course, the ICO efforts with the age-appropriate design in the UK. I spoke to the Privacy Commissioner in New Zealand, and he talked about the age-appropriate design and looking to see what's going to be happening there. COPPA, people are looking at it to see if it should be adjusted, and if so, how. You have different state coming out with privacy regulations. Canada's now looking at redoing all of theirs. It's time. And I think that out of all of the technology I've seen, yours is the most promising for addressing the underlying problems. So I'll introduce you to a lot of these people. And I think that, it'll be good for your business, but more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, it's good for children. And that's what matters. So I'll make some of those introductions, and let's see if we can use your ethically designed, well-designed, very effective technology to make sure that people of all ages are safe, secure, and private.
Thank you very much, Parry.
So we are beyond the time we were supposed to be doing this. I promised you a half hour. It's turned into 42 minutes. But I'm going to con you into working with the Cybersafety Group and helping us as we explore these issues in a more formalized way. We'll talk about that offline. I really want to get you involved in a lot of the work we're doing on advisory boards and the rest, and see if we can all put together the Cyber Safety Alliance, all of the people who are part of this ecosystem around the world, getting them together in one digital room and say, it's time, and bringing in the thinkers from Vint Cerf, the man who invented the internet, who talked about wetware. He said it's not hardware or software anymore, it's wetware, this one. And getting them all in one place while I'm still around is good. And then you and the Jeffs and the others in the world can take over and make sure that our children are well long after I'm gone. And my grandchildren, who are 6 and 8 now, can come to work for you.
Thank you, Parry. It's always been a vision of ours to make sure that the individual is in control of their identity and what they share. And, that's what we'll continue to do. Delighted to have spoken to you today.
Thank you. And you've got a wonderful team. I want to thank them for their patience and connectivity and networking and energy in the space. So please thank them all for me, all 9 in your office, in addition to you today.
I will do. Thanks, Parry. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.